Hello, I'm Jamal Bay of Melodium Mortgage Premium, Monte, Colorado. The acronym is AMPAC, and I'm Chief Judge of Coastal Court. Today is Class 149. Class 149. Right, what did we learn in Class 148? Well, the theme of Class 148 was what? Repatriation destroys colonization, right? And what do we learn in Class 148 regarding that title? Because that title is very powerful, right? Repatriation destroys colonization, right? It destroys colonization all by itself. But what is the first thing the Moors have to do? We have to repatriate. How can you destroy colonization if you don't repatriate? But repatriate back to what? Back to the state. But what's the name of the state? It's the Empire of Morocco, because that's the name on what? The treaties. So therefore, what's the nationality of the people? If in fact the state is the Empire of Morocco, then the nationality is what? Moroccan. So therefore, the Moors have to repatriate back to the state, right? That way the state's government can now recognize you as being Moroccan. And as soon as you do that, and the Moroccan state recognizes your nationality, that immediately starts to do what? It starts to destroy colonization, right? Because what is colonization? What actually is that? That's when a foreign country is enforcing its laws and its courts, right, over your territory, over the people and your land. So when you're decolonizing, what does that mean? That means you're removing the jurisdiction of a foreign country. And you're replacing it with what? Your native laws, right? For example, we are Moroccans. So therefore the state, right, and the state laws are what? Moroccan laws. And we also have what? Moroccan courts. So therefore decolonization means you're replacing the colonist laws and courts with your own laws and courts. Why is that important to happen simultaneously? Well, you cannot remove colonization and leave people without an organized dual society, or you have what? Anarchy, right? So it was the obligation, according to the Charter of the United Nations of 1945, Article 73 basically states that the administrative state, which is the colonial state, has to assist the inhabitants, i.e. the native people, during their varying stages of advancement. And it's the obligation of the colonial state to assist the Moors. So in this example, it will be the United States of America has to assist the Empire of Morocco, because those are the two legal personalities. So what's the first legal personality? It's the Empire of Morocco, right? And then United States of America. That's the name of the two states. Those are legal personalities, because states are persons in international law. And then that's what? The nationality itself of Moroccans. So you got Moroccans and you got Americans working together during what? Varying stages of advancements of decolonization. And the nationality is set forth by what? The government itself. So you got the government, the Moroccan government, right? And then you got the government of the American government. So you got the state, right? The nationality of the people and the government all working together. And the colonists are supposed to help the Empire of Morocco, the Moroccans, and the Moroccan government, right? To decolonize. You got to work together in harmony according to the charter, right? Now, once that happens, what happens next? It's a transition of what? Powers. You're transitioning, you're removing the colonist laws and courts, but you have to quickly replace it with your own laws and courts, or there will be anarchy. And this is what the Moors have been in the absence of. The Moors want to decolonize, they want to get out of the jurisdiction of the United States, but they never replaced the laws. The Moors never had their own laws. They've been abiding by what? Church laws, and that's the truth. And that is not what you consider political laws, right? We learn in the Rights of Indigenous People of the year 2007, you go to Article 5, and Article 5 sets up what? Institutions. In Article 5, it said, what did the indigenous people need to set up? It said what? Set up what? Political, legal, right? Then economic, social, and cultural institutions. So indigenous people first have to set up what? Political. What's political? That's the state and the administration of the state. What was the second word? Legal, what is that? That's your laws, statutes, right? And it's enforced by what? The courts. Then you can get into economic, social, and cultural institutions. That's Article 5 of the Rights of Indigenous People. It's just that simple. So what does that mean? Indigenous people have to set up the state, and the state's 3 branches of government. And if the Moors never did that, then how do you expect the colonists to remove their laws and courts from the land? So the Moors have to transition. It's called a merger and an acquisition. It's a merger and an acquisition, right? So what do Moors have to do? And what should the Moors have done already in the past 95 years since Nova Drali's been gone? We were supposed to establish the state or reestablish the state, enact what? Laws, meaning the Constitution is the first law of the state. The Constitution is the first law of the state. And the Constitution sets up what? 3 branches of government. And through the 3 branches of government, you start to enact what? Laws, i.e. legislation. And through that legislation, now you have laws and you got a judicial branch that can enforce said laws. And the Moors never took the time to put all that together. You understand what I'm saying? So we'll talk about that some more today. How do we repatriate back to the state? Well, first of all, the state already existed called the Empire Morocco. But what was it missing? The government. How's the government set up? Through the Constitution. The Constitution sets up the government. So the Moors, in the absence of a Constitution that named the legal personality called the Empire Morocco, the Moors, in the absence of the legal personality of the proper nationality of being Moroccan, the Moors, in the absence of the 3 branches of government to set up laws and more additional legislation, that way they can enforce all their laws through their courts. And the Moors never set that up. So today we'll talk about that some more today. Why did the Moors need a constitution? Well, what type of constitution? A national constitution. We talked about that in class 148. We are repatriating back to the state, but what type of state? It's what? The external state. What is an external state? That's the nation state, right? That's the mother state, and all other states come underneath it called the internal states. So you got the external state, and underneath it got internal states. So the Moors had to do what? We had to emerge as a sovereign, independent state. But what type of independent state? The national state was the mother state and its mother flag. And the Moors needed a flag for the Empire Morocco. Right? So we'll talk about that some more today. All right? So let's go ahead and get into the class. All right. As the Moors know, I always open up the Constitution. Constitution is paramount. All the Moors need a constitution for each of the territories. Right? That under what's commonly known as uti possidetis juris. What your internal, this is the internal constitution, such as AMPAC, the acronym AMPAC, right? This is our internal constitution as an example. Our internal constitution, it maintains the peace with other Moors who in other territories, such as the Moors in Utah, one day will establish their own constitution. They'll govern over that territory. The Moors in Wyoming will wake up and they'll establish a constitution and they'll start to govern in that territory. So in the uti possidetis juris, which is the international law norm, right, it's a principle of law, it does what? It starts to protect the Moors, to keep the Moors from infighting. It's called fratricidal suffrage. The Moors have to avoid what's commonly known as fratricidal suffrage, which means the Moors are no longer infighting because they get to share territories, you see? So it's very important for the Moors to have an internal constitution, and then that internal constitution does what? What does the internal constitution do? Okay, it comes under the national state constitution, which is the Empire Morocco. So as an example, AMPAC's constitution comes under the national constitution of the Empire Morocco. You see, so the Empire Morocco provides protections for all of the internal Moorish states. Okay? That's very important to understand because all politics is local. So your internal states take care of the local affairs, whereas the Empire Morocco takes care of the national affairs on an international level. You see? All right. So the Moors need a constitution. Okay? All right. And through the constitution is established the state, and the state must have its own national flag. all of the internal states will have their own flag, but the national flag is this one right here. This is the Empire of Morocco's national flag. This is the mother flag, right? That represents what? The Empire of Morocco. So all other flags come underneath it. All the Moors will have their own flags in their internal state. But the external state, which is the national flag, will always be flown at all times. So all of our internal flags pledge allegiance to this flag. So all the Moors will always pledge allegiance to the Empire of Morocco's flag. Okay? That's very important to understand. All nation states, what's commonly known as external states, have a national flag. Okay? All right. Now, the national flag and the Constitution for the Empire of Morocco sets up what? What does it represent? It represents the government itself. This is what the Moors were in the absence of. Because the Empire of Morocco as a state already existed. It was in a shallow grave, right? Who had to resuscitate it? It was the government itself. But we could not establish three branches of government without a constitution, because after 1945, the Charter of the United Nations said people who are trying to decolonize need to have a civilized nation, and a civilized nation has what? A government and a constitution. So the Moors were in the absence of a constitution, and the Moors in the absence of three branches of government. So the Moors needed what? A head of state, which is the Sultan, right? The Sultan is head of state, right? So at the top, what's the name of the state? The mother state, right? The external. That's very important to understand. The external state is called what? Empire of Morocco, right? It's the external sovereign independent state. That is the state, right? Umbrella state. And who's head of state? The Sultan, right? And then the government has three branches of government. Okay, so you got the executive branch, which has the prime minister. Then you got the legislative branch, who has the speaker of the house. Then you got the judicial branch and the chief judge, right? And all the other councils and departments that come underneath these three branches. You see? So now that we've elected a sultan, who's the sultan? We've elected a sultan, right? Who's the sultan? The sultan is Abdul Smith Al-Kabir, right? So the Empire of Morocco's sultan is Abdul Smith Al-Kabir. He was elected sultan, right, by the people on May 12, 2024. And you say, okay, well, who's the people? That's the question. Who is the people? By the free will of the people, who were the people who elected the sultan? It was Moroccans. Listen to me. Moroccans voted for the sultan. Americans cannot vote for a Moroccan sultan. You got a lot of Moors out there that keep saying they're Americans. Well, guess what? Americans can't vote for a Moroccan sultan. See, the only people that could vote for a sultan is Moroccans. So Moroccans, and what's the abbreviation for Moroccans? Moors. So Moors, i.e. Moroccans who pledged their allegiance back to their internal Moorish government, turn around and put together what? A referendum to vote for a sultan. And now the Moroccans have voted for Abdul Smith Al-Kabir to be the sultan. He is head of state by election, right? And at some point we'll be able to release the video, because there was a public inauguration, right? The sultan did swear in. We're just working on editing the video. Hopefully it'll be released soon. Okay? All right, so the government for the Empire of Morocco, right, has three branches, okay? And that's what we were in the absence of. How can Moors repatriate back to the state where if there's no government for you to go and talk to and fill out an application for the state to recognize you as being Moroccan? There was no government after 1956. So now we restore the government for the Empire of Morocco, not the kingdom, but the Empire of Morocco. So the sultan's back in his proper seat. Three branches of government has been reinstated. And now we've started to convene, right, to put the government back into action. You see? Listen. Why did the Moors need a constitution? Why did the Moors need three branches of government? Why did the Moors need the sultan? Okay, listen. Here's why. Here's one of the reasons why. What do I have up here? This is good brother Jamal Bay from Rise of the Moors. Now, for the record, I'm using good brother Jamal Bay, his name and likeness, only as a means to have an educational moment. This is the AMPAC study session. This is an educational platform. So what I'm going to share today isn't exclusively about Jamal Bay. It's in general about who? Moorish Americans. In general. I'm just using Jamal's name and likeness as an example. Now I want to say for the record also that AMPAC study session still has love for Jamal Bay because Jamal Bay needs some love. There's a lot of Moors have turned their back on Jamal Bay. A lot of them. But AMPAC study session will not turn their back on Jamal Bay. That must be understood. The Wazir Regional Council, which is the WRC, which is an intergovernmental organization that works on behalf of Empire Morocco, the WRC will not turn its back on Jamal Bay. And the Empire Morocco will not turn its back on Jamal Bay. However, Jamal Bay, by his own free will, has not petitioned the Empire Morocco. Jamal Bay has not petitioned the WRC, and Jamal Bay has not reached out to anybody regarding AMPAC study session. So that must be understood. Because you got a lot of people out there right now going against Jamal, and I don't think it's fair. All right, but we'll talk about that today. So keep in mind, AMPAC study session already reached their arms out to good brother Jamal more than once, but we never heard from him. Okay? All right, so like I said, we just want to use Jamal as a case study to talk about Moorish Americans in general as to why did the Moors need a constitution? Why did we reestablish the Constitution? Why did we put the three branches of government together? Why did we reinstate the Sultan as head of state? Well, one of the reasons why is because of this. Moors keep getting caught up. They keep continuing to have run-ins with the local policy enforcers, right? So we're going to talk about this today. How can the Moors start to avoid these type of incidents? This is what the Moors got to start understanding. And let me say this for the record. The Moors have been miseducated. So today we'll talk about that miseducation, but we're also talking about what? Proper education, right? Because in class 148 we learned about what? The Moors needed proper information, and then the proper information gives you what? The application of the proper information. So the proper information sets up the application, and the application creates what? Causation. And the causation creates what? Effect. Cause and effect. So today we're talking about what? Unfortunately, good brother Jamal, right, who's just, in general, we're talking about Moorish Americans, have been miseducated, so got misinformation, and then they got the application of misinformation that creates what? A cause and effect. And this right here is the cause and effect of misinformation and the wrong application of misinformation. And this is the cause and effect right here. We're looking at it in real time. There it is, right? Okay, so for a background, the Moors have to remember that Jamal got caught up, right? He had arms, he had a convoy going on, and he was traveling from Rhode Island and headed to Maine. Right? So he left his place of residence in Rhode Island. He crossed into Massachusetts, right? Heading to Maine. So he had to get through Massachusetts and then travel through New Hampshire in order to get up to Maine. So once he crossed over the border into Massachusetts, he entered into what? A different jurisdiction. So he left Rhode Island as a jurisdiction and he entered into Massachusetts, totally different jurisdiction. Right? So unfortunately, Jamal Bay was found guilty on June 18, 2024. And then he had a sentencing date of July 16, 2024. Right? So we're going to learn about the sentencing. So he's already found guilty on 6 out of 7 charges regarding what? Arms. Right? All right. So let's learn a little bit more about this. Your brother Joseph from the top.
2 men sentenced in 2021 armed standoff on Massachusetts Highway. Warburn, Massachusetts, AP. 2 men have been sentenced for their role in an armed standoff on a busy Massachusetts highway in 2021 that lasted more than 8 hours and caused traffic delays during a busy 4th of July weekend. Jamal Trevon Sanders Latimer was sentenced Tuesday in Middlesex Superior Court to 3 to 5 years in prison with 4 years probation. Stephen Anthony Perez was sentenced to just over a year and a half behind bars and 4 years of probation. They were convicted of multiple gun charges last month related to the standoff. The two were part of a group called Rise of the Moors and claimed they were headed to Maine for training when a state trooper stopped to ask if they needed help. Authorities said that sparked the long standoff on Interstate 95 after some members of the group ran into the woods next to the highway. Nearly a dozen people were arrested, and state police say they recovered 3 AR-15 rifles, 2 pistols, and a bolt-action rifle, a shotgun, and a short barrel rifle. The men, who were dressed in fatigues and body armor and were armed with long guns and pistols, did not have licenses to carry firearms in the state. The Southern Poverty Law Center says the Moors Sovereign Citizen Movement is a collection of independent organizations and individuals that emerged in the 1990s as an offshoot of the anti-government sovereign citizen movement. People in the movement believe individual citizens hold sovereignty over and are independent of the authority of the federal and state governments. They have frequently clashed with state and federal authorities over their refusal to obey laws. The vast majority of Moors sovereign citizens are African American, according to the SPLC.
All right, thank you very much. So what do we learn from this? Well, first of all, Jamal got sentenced to 3 to 5 years, right? He got sentenced to 3 to 5 years. So, unfortunately, the good brother, right, because he is our good brother, right? That's our good brother because he is a fellow Moor, right? But what's the problem? Well, unfortunately, good brother Jamal Bay was miseducated by his so-called Moorish American master teachers who told him to enforce the Constitution. And we're going to break this down today, okay? Because Moors don't want to take the time to break this down. They really don't. You got so-called grand sheiks out there who absolutely have walked away from Jamal Bay. They used to be, thick as thieves, right? Cujo Eel has turned his back on Jamal Bay. Tashri Bay never did help Jamal Bay. So they left Jamal Bay out there all by himself. And we all know that Jamal Bay is very stubborn. So he tried to tackle this all by himself. And eventually even he had to acquire the services of attorneys, right? So what we're going to learn today, keep it in mind, even though we're using Jamal Bay's name and likeness because this is public information, this is really about Moorish Americans in general. All right? So let's learn from this. Well, what's going on? Okay, listen to how they're talking about this, right? So he was found guilty, okay? So let's read this part right here. It says what? Nearly a dozen people were arrested. And state police, listen, and state police said they recovered 3 AR-15 rifles, 2 pistols, a bolt-action rifle, a shotgun, and short barrel rifle. The men who were dressed in fatigues and body armor and were armed with long guns and pistols did not have licenses to carry firearms in the state. You see what they're doing? They're using specific words to talk jurisdiction. The jurisdiction is what? The state. So since they said Jamal, they said what? Jamal had what? What was the evidence that the prosecutor was using against Jamal? They was using what? First of all, the name what? State. What's the name of the state? Massachusetts. So it was Massachusetts versus who? Jamal. You see? The state was bringing this case. And they started saying under evidence they had all these arms in their possession, right, that they removed from Jamal. And they turn around saying it was who? The state police took these arms. You see how they're using the word state? Pay attention, I'm making a point. I'll read it again. Nearly a dozen people were arrested and state police said they recovered all these arms, right? And it said what? That these people didn't have licenses to carry firearms in the state. These people did not have licenses to carry firearms in the state, right? They didn't have it. They did not. Right, let me shrink that a little bit. They did not have licenses to carry firearms where? In the state. You see how they're talking? You see even how the news reporters making somewhat of a legal argument? Listen to me. Who has the sovereign jurisdiction? The state. The state creates laws. So let's now talk about the state. Listen, and I know more than say, oh, it's de facto, it's chartered, it's a corporation. Yeah, I know that, but guess what? The Moors still colonized and naturalized, and they acquiesced to allow Massachusetts and all the 50 several states, the federal government of the United States of America, to maintain colonialism in Morocco because the Moors failed to follow instructions of the Treaty of Madrid of 1880, Article 15, paragraph 1, that says, if any subject of Morocco has been what? Naturalized in a foreign country, then that naturalized Moor has to do what? He has to return to Morocco, repatriate back to the state, and then what? Choose between the entire laws of the empire of Morocco's government. So the Moors, 99.9% of Moors have not done that. Therefore, we've acquiesced and allowed the colonists to maintain what? Their laws and their courts in Morocco to keep us subjugated. I'm talking in general. Follow me. So this news reporter is using this word state, state, state. Now listen to what the news reporter says next. You got to catch these things. It says, the Southern Poverty Law Center says the Moorish sovereign citizen movement is a collection of independent organizations. You see that? Did it say a collective independent states? No. You see the news reporter doing? It's doing what? It's using what? The parties must be known, their name and the party names. They said Jamal was part of an organization and he got detained by who? State police. And Jamal was affiliated with an organization. You see what they're doing? They didn't say Jamal was a part of a state. They're using specific language here. Words matter. Words matter. So immediately they're already telling you what Jamal did was a violation, that he is not a Moor of what? A state. They say he's a Moor of what? Some type of independent organization, because all the Moors keep saying they got what? Civic organizations. A lot of Moors say they got what? A religious corporation. You see what the news person doing? So first they talk state, and they say the Moors are affiliated to organizations and corporations. You see what they're doing? Then they turn around and say what? Okay, listen. From the top, it says, the Southern Poverty Law Center says the Moorish sovereign citizen movement is a collection of independent organizations and individuals that emerged in the 1990s as an offshoot of the anti-government sovereign citizens movement. That used this word sovereign citizen quite a few times, right? So what did we learn about the word sovereign? That means you are claiming that no one has jurisdiction over you as an individual. Because sovereign means what? The state. Who has sovereignty? Only the state. The state does what? It issues sovereignty to the government and the people. So every time they keep calling more sovereign citizen, they saying you trying to stand there all by yourself and act like you're a state all by yourself. Like you got jurisdiction over yourself and nobody else's jurisdiction has jurisdiction over you. So therefore you acting like you're what? Head of state. You acting like you what? You're acting like you're the executive branch, legislative branch, and judicial branch all rolled up in one, and you're the citizen and national at the same time. That's a sovereign citizen. You a state all by yourself. You got to see how they're talking, right? Now listen, It says, people in the movement believe, see that word? People in the movement believe. You see they're using choice words? What does believe mean? You have no legal argument. You can't prove what you're saying. You got to see how they're writing this. Because they let the United Nations know these Moors are still acquiescing and these Moors still haven't checked the boxes required in order for them to repatriate back to their state. And they're still naturalized under the jurisdiction of the United States. So that's why they're saying believe. Because they said Jamal still don't understand substantive law, and Jamal still didn't understand procedure law. Of what? Treaties and international law. Y'all see how they write that word believe? They keep saying this to Moors. And Moors aren't listening. They're not paying attention to words. Words matter. Start here. People in the movement believe individual citizens hold sovereignty over and are independent of the authority of federal and state governments. They have frequently clashed with states. See that? They have frequently clashed with states and federal authorities over their refusal to obey what? Laws. So where they saying the laws are derived from is derived from what? The state and the federal government. You see how they're talking? But they say Jamal is affiliated to what? An independent organization. So the news guy knows that he's invoking state rights and state laws. And Jamal was using what? Organization, abstract beliefs. This is the news guy. This ain't even an attorney saying this. This is the news saying it. Listen to this last sentence. The vast majority of Moorish sovereign citizens are African American. You see that? What are they trying to send? What are they saying? I'll read it again. The vast majority of Moorish sovereign citizens are what? African American. You know why they said African American? They're trying to say these Moors are still what? Citizens of the United States. They still naturalized in the 14th Amendment. And guess who co-signed on the 14th Amendment? It was the Sultan who signed the Treaty of Madrid of 1880. And the Treaty of Madrid of 1880 that was signed by the Sultan agreed to allow 12 European states to naturalize the Moors. So this news reporter right here saying these Moors are still citizens of the United States of America and of the United States. Therefore, all the 50 Union states still have jurisdiction over these Moors as well. Now listen, let's go backwards. Right here it said, in Massachusetts, that Jamal Bay did not have licenses to carry firearms in what? The state. Right? Okay, let's take a look at the map. Listen. Okay. So we got right here Rhode Island in purple, Massachusetts in green. So they're talking about the state called Massachusetts. Right? So let's go to Massachusetts. Listen. Right here. I put up Massachusetts, one of their websites, right? Let's make sure, because I want Moors to see this reference point. Because I know Moors like reference points. Brother Dre from top.
An official website of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts.
Okay, so it's an official website. Of who? Massachusetts. But what is Massachusetts according to the United States? A state. Listen.
Gun ownership in Massachusetts. Massachusetts residents 15 years and older who wish to possess, carry, and transport firearms, ammunition, and feeding devices are required to have a firearms license. Firearms licenses are issued by municipal police departments.
All right. So right there on the first page, Massachusetts says you need a license to carry and transport. So Jamal Bay has crossed over into Massachusetts territory, i.e. jurisdiction, and he's doing what? He's carrying arms and transporting arms, and he's in the void of what? A license. So he gets pulled over, he has all these arms, but no license in the jurisdiction of Massachusetts. So immediately, soon as they asked him, you got a license? He said, I don't need no license. Guess what he just admitted for the record? That what? He just violated what? Massachusetts state laws. We're talking about state laws today. All right, I'm taking my time here because Moore's need to come back and you need to watch this video as many times you possibly can. Before Jamal even crossed over to Massachusetts, Jamal already should have looked up and say, what are the laws of Massachusetts? And he would have saw on the first page of the website, you need a license to carry and transport. But what did Jamal decide to do? He said, your stinking laws don't apply to me. You see? Why was he thinking he didn't need a license? Well, for two reasons. First of all, because he thinks he's a Moorish American and outside of the jurisdiction of the United States and outside of the jurisdiction of the several Union states. That's number one. Number two, what's another reason why he thought he didn't need a license? Is because his so-called master teacher told him to enforce the Constitution of the federal government. So what do you have to understand from this, what I just said? Jamal was reading the federal Constitution of the United States for United States citizens, and their Second Amendment say you have a right to bear arms. But for some reason, Jamal thinks a constitution is the only law. And he thinks that any laws outside of a constitution are unconstitutional. Keep it in mind, he's saying he's not even a citizen of the United States, but yet he wants to enforce a citizen of the United States constitution. So therefore, the Constitution of the United States in its Second Amendment says you have a right to bear arms. And Jamal thinks that one sentence is all that matters, is that you don't need no permit. Why does Jamal think he don't need a permit or license? Because he's saying the Constitution didn't have expressed language that said you needed a permit or license. So in Jamal's mind, he thinks that Massachusetts is breaching the Constitution of the federal government. We're going to learn today that Jamal Bay and all the Moorish Americans don't understand these four words I'm about to say. The Moorish Americans never studied what's commonly known as enumerated powers of a constitution. The Moors never studied what's called the implied powers. They never studied what's called resulting powers. And they never studied what's commonly known as inherent powers. The Moors need to look those four things up, right? We're talking about that today. Let's get back to the point. So Massachusetts already stated on their public website, you need a license. So let's go back to Jamal. So Jamal's traveling through Massachusetts, and what? He did not have a license to carry firearms in what? Massachusetts what? State. So he was already what? Breaching the law, breaking the law, as soon as he crossed over into Massachusetts from Rhode Island. But yet, he's turned around and went and got himself what? What did he do? He went and got himself a bunch of lawyers to do what? Fight a case where it was clear evidence, because he could not produce what? A license. It was an open and shut case. There's only one or two questions they should have asked Jamal. You got a license? What's his answer? No. As soon as he said no, guess what? He's guilty. Allegedly. Because he got to be found guilty if he decides to fight it in court. So he's riding around, no license. I know the more like, well, you don't need no license. Oh, you don't need a license? Okay. Keep going and doing what you're doing. Or you can sit here and pay attention to what I'm about to say, because this right here is in fairy tale. This man's in jail for 3 to 5 years. So listen to what I got to say. I'm trying to help the Moors. So Jamal, even though he got these attorneys, the attorneys already knew there was only one question the prosecutor had to ask. Does Jamal have a license for these arms that he was carrying and transporting? The answer is no. So Jamal had fought this all the way through trial, and he's found guilty on June 18, 2024, to nobody's surprise, because he didn't have a license. Then he's sentenced on July 16, 2024, to no one's surprise because he was found guilty because he didn't have what? A license. Because his teacher told him he didn't need a license. You got to listen to what I'm saying. Now, Jamal, when he first went to court, he first got detained, he kept saying he's not Jamal Bay. He kept saying he's not Jamal what? Latimer. Let me ask you a question. How did Jamal purchase those firearms? When he went to Walmart or wherever he got all those firearms, what ID did he produce to purchase those arms? Because they're going to do a background check before they let you purchase those arms. So Jamal knows damn well he purchased those arms with an ID that said what? Jamal Latimer. Then he turns around, he gets caught up. As soon as he gets the arms, now all of a sudden he's Jamal Bay again. He gets caught up in Massachusetts and say, I don't know who Jamal Latimer is, even though Jamal Latimer purchased the arms. So he gets to court and say, well, this is state of Massachusetts versus Jamal Latimer. And he says, I don't know who that is. So the court immediately says, oh, so we got an alien in the room? So they hold Jamal for like 6 months to a year just because Jamal keeps saying he's not Jamal Latimer, but yet he purchased the arms in the name of Jamal Latimer, or someone else purchased the arms and gave it to him. And what ID did they use to purchase the arms? So now he's in court saying, I ain't Jamal Latimer, I'm Jamal Bay. Well, time out. What name is on the registration of the United States and the several union states? Is Jamal Latimer. You know how I know? Because the case says Jamal Latimer, which means Jamal Bay never went down to the county and changed his name on the record to be who? Jamal Bay. Because his Moorish American teacher told him, you Jamal Bay, you can just get a nationality card from R.V. Bay Publications, and that's sufficient. All you got to do is just send some paperwork off and say, I declare myself and I declare my nationality, and now all of a sudden I'm Jamal Bay, just like that. So now he gets in front of the court. He says, I'm not Jamal Bay. He says, I'm not Jamal Latimer. They hold him up as an alien. Eventually he has to accept Jamal Latimer because that's how he ended up getting what? Bail. Now he comes back to court to fight it through trial as who? Jamal Latimer, a.k.a. Jamal Bay. He's found guilty and then he's sentenced. Why? All because he didn't have a license. Who told him he didn't need a license? His teacher. His teacher told him to go read the Constitution of the United States, Second Amendment. Oh, it don't say nothing about you need a license in Second Amendment. Well, time out. I thought you said you weren't a citizen of the United States. So why are you invoking the Constitution of the United States since you say you're not a citizen of the United States? That don't make no sense. But then next you got to understand these four things. Let's talk about it. I'm going to start breaking this down in just a moment. Listen, here's what Moors never understood. Here are 4 items Moors got to study. The first item is called enumerated powers. The second one is implied powers. The third is resulting powers. And the fourth is called inherent powers. Let's break it down. Your brother Dre, number 1.
Number 1, enumerated powers. The expressed powers in the Constitution.
Pause. What does enumerated powers mean? That means when you read the Constitution, let's say it's 40 pages. Well, the Constitution itself is law. And whatever is in the Constitution is law. It is called enumerated powers, is the provisions and language in that contract called the Constitution. It's a standalone Constitution. It's called enumerated powers, is drafted in the Constitution. Okay? That's enumerated powers. When you think enumerated, you think Constitution. But listen, Brother Dre.
2, implied powers. Powers not expressed but implied in the Constitution.
Okay, here's what the Moors don't understand. The Constitution is enumerated powers, but the Constitution also gave implied powers to who? The legislative branch. So the Constitution says, the Constitution set up a legislative branch because it's one of the three branches, and it gave the legislative branch powers to do what? Enact laws. So it's implied powers that the Constitution and its enumerated language gave the legislators a right to create additional language, commonly known as what? Legislation. You must think of legislation as what? An addendum to the master contract. The Constitution is the master contract, but legislation is like addendums, is added, extended language from the enumerated Constitution, which is the master contract. So all legislative acts are nothing but addendums that goes back, is binding and is attachment to the master contract. That's called implied powers. That the legislative branch, because the Constitution gave the legislative branch implied powers to create what? Legislation and laws. The legislative branch creates laws that's not even mentioned in the Constitution. It's an addendum, it's additional language. It's an extension of the master contract into legislation. But Moors don't understand that. So Moors been reading the Constitution and says, well, Amendment Number 2 says, I got a right to bear arms. They don't say nothing about a permit. That's because the legislative branch had implied powers to enact laws that says you need what? A permit or a license. That's called implied powers. The Moors are stuck on just reading the Constitution. They got to understand the Constitution gave the legislative branch powers to enact additional language. Listen. Number 3.
Number 3, resulting powers. The combination of enumerated and implied powers.
All right, so what's the resulting powers? See, that's a combination of enumerated powers, which is the language of the Constitution, as well as legislative powers, because the legislators created laws, legislation. So when you combine those two, that's called resulting powers, because the result of the language of the Constitution are the enumerated powers, and the result of legislation from the legislators is all put that together is called resulting powers, because it resulted from the language of the Constitution and also resulted from the language of what? Legislation. You put them two together, it's called what? A result. A resulting powers. Okay? This is what Moors got to understand. This is what Massachusetts was using. They was using what? They were using implied powers and resulting powers, because they said you need a license in Massachusetts. So therefore, when Massachusetts created laws, what did Massachusetts create? It came from the implied powers of what? The legislative branch. You see, because the enumerated power said you have a right to bear arms. But then the legislative branch on the implied power says, yeah, but you need a license in order to bear arms. You see? So now the result is what? Resulting powers is what? The combination of enumerated and implied powers. Because you got a right to bear arms as long as you have a license. Legislative branch and the Constitution coming together. See? Under resulting powers. That's the result. Okay. This last one, number 4.
Number 4, inherent powers. Powers not explicitly specified in the Constitution enable the government to take actions necessary to efficiently perform essential duties.
All right. So number 4 is called inherent powers. Well, what's inherent powers? It says powers not explicitly specified in the Constitution enable the government to take actions necessary to efficiently perform essential duties. So whatever language is not in the Constitution, right? And whatever language is not in legislation, then inherent power says what? We got to create some type of ordinance or a policy, because we're in the absence of legislation and we're in the absence of any type of provisions in the Constitution, but we need over here inherent powers to enact something that puts some type of organized dual society into play. Meaning the inherent powers means there was no legislation and nothing in the Constitution. So this box over here for inherent power says what? Well, we got to write something. We got to say, let's say the ordinance is what? No loitering. The ordinance says what? No littering. You see? The ordinance says what? No begging, no panhandling. And this is what inherent powers is in order for the government to create some type of ordinance that maintains an organized dual society. You see what I'm saying? So these four things is what the Moors never understood. They kept reading the Constitution. They were stopping right there. No, man, I'm just going to read the Constitution. And they thought everything number 2 under implied power was unconstitutional because they thought the only language that's enforceable was only in the Constitution. But they don't realize that's enumerated powers of that language and that master contract. And then the legislative branch had what? Implied powers to enact what? Legislation. That's implied powers because now it's an addendum back to the master contract on the implied powers from the legislature. And after that, it's called what? Resulting powers, because as a result of both the Constitution and legislation, the resulting powers is the combination of the Constitution and legislation combined creates resulting powers. But if the Constitution has no express language and there's no legislation, now you got to create inherent powers in order to put in some type of ordinance that says, hey, no loitering, no littering, no begging. You see? And this is what Moors don't understand. They got to look these things up. You know why Moors don't understand none of this? Because Moors don't know nothing about government, because Noble Drew Ali said, learn from the Europeans and then run government. And if the Moors listen, no. And this is why Moors don't know nothing about inherent powers, implied powers, resulting powers, or inherent powers, because you didn't put together your Moorish governments. You too busy hiding in the temples. You too be trying to enforce something through some organization or corporation. And even the person who wrote that up ad regarding Jamal Bay was talking about state rights versus somebody's independent organization. Even the news person knew this. Why is it that Moors don't know this? Because we don't know nothing about government, because we haven't been trying to, we have not, I should say, been trying to re-emerge as a sovereign, independent state. We have been deceived and lied to tell us that all our rights come through some damn church, some temple, or some other type of church. We've been lied to. And this is why Moors don't know nothing about this, and this is why they continue to get caught up, because Jamal Bay kept reading the Constitution of the United States. Second Amendment said he had a right to bear arms, and since he didn't see any more words that says that you need a permit, he didn't see with the permit, so he immediately said, oh, Massachusetts laws are what? Unconstitutional. All because he didn't understand implied powers, he didn't understand resulting powers, and he didn't understand inherent powers. This is too easy. But Moors don't study. Listen, this is the Treaty of Madrid of 1880. We're still talking about Jamal, but we're really talking about who? Moorish Americans in general, especially when it comes to arms, right? If arms is the subject matter regarding the merits of Jamal's cases about arms, right? The main merits, okay? This is the Treaty of Madrid of 1880. And Moors run around saying, Jamal Latimer, name is in all caps. This is what Moors keep running around saying. Oh, his name is in all caps, so therefore it's not enforceable. Okay, listen. Let's go down to Article 15 and we show the Moors some. The Moors got to study. If the Moors don't study, they're going to be forever fighting in the jurisdiction of the United States. So on Article 15, look what the United States has a right to do. Okay, good brother Joseph. Let's read the title in Article 15. We'll jump down to paragraph 2.
Right of protection in Morocco, July 3rd, 1880. Article 15. Foreign naturalization heretofore acquired by subjects of Morocco according to the rules established by the laws of each country shall be continued to them as regards all its effects without any restrictions.
Okay. So the Treaty of Madrid of 1880, Article 15, paragraph 2. It reads as follows. Foreign naturalization heretofore acquired by subject of Morocco, acquired by who? Jamal Bay. Jamal Bay is still a subject of Morocco, still naturalized. So let's take it from the beginning. foreign naturalization heretofore acquired by Jamal Bay according to the rules established by the laws of each country, such as United States of America and the several union states and their local municipalities, shall be continued to the United States of America, their several union states, and their municipalities as regards all its effects, without any restriction. So the Moors turn around and say, I don't need a license. That's not true. Because Massachusetts created laws that have effects without any restrictions. Then the Moors say, well, my name is in all caps. So what? The Sultan signed this contract and allowed the United States to create whatever internal laws they wanted to without what? Any restriction. So even though the Moors keep talking about, well, that name's all caps, that's an artificial person, guess what? The United States had a right to put everybody's names, including white folks' names in all caps too, ain't just Moors. But the Moors specifically don't understand that the United States and the several union states can enforce laws without any restriction. They can enforce laws without any restrictions. So Jamal can't turn around and say, well, I'm not Jamal Latimer. Well, guess what Massachusetts, the United States says? Yes, you are. Well, I don't want to accept that name because it's in all caps. So what? The Sultan said we can do what the heck we want to do without any restrictions, Jamal, and all the Moorish Americans, without any restrictions. All the laws. And what type of laws the United States and the several union states got? Well, they got a bunch of laws that says they got licenses and permits, and they got a bunch of laws that say they can use your name in all caps. But see, your Moorish American teacher's not going to read this out loud to you. They avoid this type of information because if Jamal Bays of the world found out the United States has a treaty right to invoke any type of laws against Moors, or should I say any citizens of the United States, then the Moors don't have a right to reject it as long as they're still what? Naturalized. Right. And Jamal is still naturalized in the jurisdiction of the United States. And the United States recognizes the several 50 states. So the United States of America, listen, as a de jure state that Sidi Muhammad recognized in 1789, because George Washington created a brand new constitution, and George Washington became the first president of the United States of America as a legal personality. And George Washington deposited that constitution with the Sultan of Morocco on December 1st, 1789. And put it into full force and effect once he deposited it, or else they would not have what? No force of law if they would not have given it to the Sultan. So the United States of America turned around and created a legal personality called what? The United States, right? In 1871, right? Through an act of Congress, who the Congress had what? Implied powers to create what? A corporation. So through the legislation of the United States of America, they had implied powers or resulting powers or what? Inherent powers to create a municipal corporation. And through that municipal corporation called the federal government, that federal government now had what? Implied powers, right? Resulting powers and inherent powers to create what? 50 union states. So you got to understand the United States of America's Congress is what created the United States. So therefore, the United States has powers. It may have what's called subordinate. Write that down. The United States of America and its Congress created the United States and gave the United States what? Subordinate powers to who? United States of America. So everything the United States does is subordinate to who? United States of America. So everything the United States federal government, i.e. municipal corporation, does is subordinate to the United States of America. And then the federal government, commonly known as the United States, created what? All the 50 union states underneath it. And all the 50 union states are subordinate to who? The United States. The United States is subordinate to who? The United States of America. And they did all this through their Congress. And through the Congress, Congress has what? Implied powers, right? And then there's what? Resulting powers. And then there's a such thing called inherent powers. And Moors never understood this. They still got to go study. Even though I'm saying it right now, you got to go back and do the research to find out what these four things are. What does it mean regarding enumerated powers? What is implied powers? What is resulting powers? What is inherent powers? Moors got to look this up. They ain't never been taught this before. This is why they keep going to jail, because they don't know, they don't understand law. Listen. So the United States can enforce their laws in the several union states without any restrictions. So Jamal Bay went in there talking about, I ain't Jamal Latimer. Wrong answer. Listen. We're talking laws. You see, right here. Let's read Article 15, paragraph 2 one more time. Brother Joseph.
Paragraph 2. Foreign naturalization heretofore acquired by subjects of Morocco according to the rules established by the laws of each country shall be continued to them as regards all its effects without any restriction.
So therefore, the United States and the several union states, including the federal government, was creating laws. We're going to talk about that today. What are laws? You see? But look what the Sultan is signing in his contract. He's allowing the 12 signatory powers, i.e. the European states, to naturalize the Moors and enforce their laws and courts against the Moors. You see what's happening? Listen, why did the Moors need a constitution? Why did the Moors need a constitution? I'll tell you why. Because of this. So we can avoid for the Moors to end up in the courts of the several union states. Why did the Moors need a constitution in Morocco? To avoid Moors from getting caught up because they don't have no license. You see, the Empire of Morocco can issue licenses to the Moors. That way the Moors have proper standing in what? Law. So the Empire of Morocco's constitution, listen, the Empire of Morocco's constitution, right? The constitution is what? Enumerated powers of the constitution. So the constitution itself, let's say it's 40 pages, that's 40 pages of law for the Empire of Morocco. And then the legislative branch has what? Implied powers, because they can write addendums to the master contract. Therefore, the House members of the Empire of Morocco, Moorish sisters, can write laws, right, that provides Moors the right to have a license that's listed with what? The Empire of Morocco. That way now your arms are protected to have a license with the Empire of Morocco. That must be understood. Why did the Moors need a constitution? So we can write laws for Moors. Because right now the Moors have to stick to the laws of the colonists. Why? Because the Moors have been decolonized. What does decolonized mean? You have to create your own laws to have your own courts. And the Moors never did that. Okay, let's break this down. Listen. Take it to the board. What's happening up here? What's the title? It says what? The Moors were in the absence of a legal personality. Therefore, the Moors had no legal argument. I'll read again. The Moors were in the absence of a legal personality. Therefore, the Moors had no legal argument. What does that title mean? The Moors had what? They're in the absence of what? Legal personality of what? The state, first of all, Empire of Morocco. We were in the absence of that. We need a constitution to recognize what? The state. Then the constitution then said the nationality is what? Moroccan. That's what it says in this constitution. This right here is just the cover page. But within the bodies of the enumerated powers of the constitution, it says your nationality is Moroccan. And that's called what? A legal personality. So the constitution is a legal personality. The name of the state, Empire of Morocco, is a legal personality. And your nationality is a legal personality. And then what else did the Constitution set up? It set up what? It set up a government. That's also what? A legal personality. The government itself is a legal personality. So the Moors were in the absence of a legal personality of both the state, the nationality, and the government. So therefore, since we was in the absence of all that, therefore, the Moors had no legal argument. You couldn't go into nobody's court and say who you are, because you had no legal personality of a state that recognized you as a Moor. Tell me the name of the state for the Moorish Americans. Is there a Moorish America state? No. Is there a Mexam state? No. None of these things exist in a constitution that's been ratified, deposited, and promulgated in accordance to international law. So therefore, when Moors say, I'm a Moorish American, but yet there's no Moorish America state, that means you're just what? Stateless. Therefore, you have no what? Legal personality, because the legal personality is what? The state. The legal personality is what? The government. Moorish Americans have no three branches of government. And then they turn around, the ultimate sin is what? They say they're Moorish American, and Moorish American is an adjective, it's not a noun. And the state didn't recognize you as a Moorish American. Tell me the name of the state and the state law that recognizes you as a Moorish American. It don't exist. Now, don't get me wrong. Moors got these temples and churches recognizing you as a Moorish American, but is a church a state? No. Only a state has sovereignty to extend to the people. To the Moors in the absence of legal personalities. So therefore, the Moors had no legal arguments. They couldn't prove anything. This is why the reporter said the Moor had what? A belief. Why do they keep telling Moors it's a belief? Because Moors have not been able to prove anything regarding their legal arguments, because they can't prove there's a legal personality for Moorish Americans. It don't exist, and they ain't caught on yet, and now Jamal's in jail. Listen, I'm gonna break down these three columns. This is what Moors don't understand. Moors got to understand these three columns. What's the first column? Positive law. What's the second column? Facts. Right? And then the third column is what? Case law. So this column right here is about positive law. What is laws? That's your statute. What is laws? The Constitution itself is law. That's the enumerated power of the Constitution. That's law. And then the legislators, right? The legislators create what? Legislation. Legislation is law, right? The legislation turns into law once it's what? Fully ratified by the House, and they pass it over to who? The head of government. For example, the House of Representatives of the United States and the Senate gets together, passes a bill. Once they pass the bill, they pass it over who? To the president. Then the president signs it into law, so now it becomes what? Law. Because at first it's just legislation, but the president or head of government or head of state has to sign it into law. Okay, what else under positive law? Statutes. So once he signs the law, now you create statutes that support the laws. What else under positive law? Now you got ordinances. All these municipalities have ordinances. Okay, that's under what? Positive law. Ordinances, then you got regulations, policies, i.e. municipal laws. This is what the United States is doing. And the several union states, they're creating what? Positive laws, at least they call it positive laws under their what? Domestic laws. They call it domestic laws, positive laws under municipal laws, but we'll learn more about that today, right? So under their jurisdiction, they call that concrete law, because all this is in writing. It's expressed laws. Now on facts, what happened to Jamal Bay? So Jamal Bay was up against Massachusetts legislation. Jamal Bay was up against Massachusetts Constitution, Massachusetts legislation, Massachusetts laws, Massachusetts statutes, Massachusetts ordinances, Massachusetts regulations, Massachusetts policies, and Massachusetts municipal laws. That's what Jamal Bay was up against. Now over here on the facts, he started introducing facts, material facts, i.e. evidence. Okay, what's material facts? Okay, fact. What's a fact? Facts are what? Substantive issues and evidence to support your standing in law, i.e. the merits of the case. So what's the merits of the case, where the prosecutor's introducing substantive evidence, i.e. the merits, right? And the defendant's introducing evidence, right? Exhibits, right? And both sides are saying, we got evidence. They're putting on the record, commonly known as facts. And somewhere between the prosecutor's facts and the defendant's facts lies what? The truth. And it gets all sorted out by the jury and the judge in the end. But what happens? Both parties start putting their substantive issues and evidence on the record to support what? Their standing in what? In law. All your evidence must have standing in law. So Jamal started putting things on the record as evidence that had no standing in law. But the prosecutor had everything that had what? Standing in law. So first Jamal tried to fight it as a more Samaritan. Well, he was losing. Wrong what? Legal argument, because he could not substantiate it. Then he came back as a what? Citizen, and he still lost. Why? Because Massachusetts says you need a dang on license. So he lost on the facts of his evidence as a Moorish American because it has no standing in law. And then he lost as a U.S. citizen because he didn't have no license. So he lost on the facts. His evidence did not support what? The law, because the law said he needed a license and he couldn't produce it. Now let's go over here and look at case law. Under case law is what? Judicial decisions from resolved previous cases, i.e. precedent, stare decisis, or res judicata. So in Jamal Bay's case, as soon as he walked in the courtroom, the prosecutor already knows Jamal ain't got no license. You don't think the prosecutor checked the record to see if there's a Jamal Latimer or Jamal Bay with a license? Of course he checked. And then Jamal himself couldn't produce the license. So therefore, as soon as Jamal walked in the courtroom with a public defender or a private paid attorney, his attorney already knew Jamal violated the law. The judge knew Jamal violated the law because the judge already had access to what? All the exhibits. He looking through the exhibits like, I don't see exhibit for Jamal Latimer or Jamal Bay with a license. Good luck with this case, but we'll hear you out. That's why they call it a hearing. They're hearing you. But in the end, what happens? The judge gets involved after the jury gets back, right? And they enforcing what? Judicial decisions from resolved previous cases. So you're already getting people caught up that had arms, didn't have no license. Well, what happened to them? They were found guilty. What happened to them? They got sentenced. So the judge already knew that, according to the verdict, that Jamal, under case law, all the judge had to do is go back and look at the many cases where people did not have a license in Massachusetts. And the judge now has to render his ruling based upon what? Well-settled principles of previous cases where people, i.e. citizens, did not have licenses in Massachusetts jurisdiction. And all of a sudden it becomes what? Settled by law. Now listen, in the first column about policy law is all about concrete law. In the second column, you put all your substantive issues and evidence to support your standing in law, i.e. the merits of the case, results in what? You trying to say, the prosecutor says, trying to say that Jamal Bay injured the state by breaking its laws. So there was a breach of law by Jamal Bay under the facts. This is what the prosecutor's proving. Introducing evidence. What did he introduce? All the arms. Then he's found guilty, and now the judge looks at it and says, well, previous case law say everybody that's found guilty that didn't have a license ends up with a sentencing guidelines. And the judge decides to say, okay, I'm going to settle this, settled by law, because the judge is looking at what? The law. And he's looking at the evidence that's supported by what? The law. And he's looking at previous cases that had principles and already well-settled principles that it was settled by the judge according to what? The law. So it was an open and shut case. All because of one piece of paper that Jamal Bay was missing, called a license. And he thought he didn't need it because of two things. One, because he thought he was a Moorish American and outside the jurisdiction of the laws of the United States and the several Union states. And the second reason why is because even though he said he is a citizen, he's still over here trying to invoke the Constitution of the United States that's for citizens. And then he goes straight to the Second Amendment and say, well, according to this Constitution, it says I have a right to bear arms. And he's thinking that's the only law because he don't understand what? Enumerated powers of a Constitution, right? And the implied powers of the legislative branch can say you need a license. And then as the resulting powers of the combination of the Constitution and legislation gives resulting powers that says you definitely need a license. And then there's inherent powers to create ordinances, etc., in order to make sure you have an organized dual society. So Jamal got caught up on what? Implied powers, because the legislative branch said you need a license, and Jamal kept reading the Constitution, said it don't say that in the Constitution. Because he never understood enumerated powers, implied powers, resulting powers, and inherent powers. Why didn't he understand it? Because he was never taught that by his so-called master teachers. The master teachers, so-called master teachers, have absolutely miseducated the Moors. Miseducated them. So that miseducation, that misinformation create what? A misapplication. So the application and miseducation created a cause and effect of Jamal Bay going to jail, just like a lot of Moorish Americans are going to jail thinking they got a right to bear arms without a permit because they keep reading the Constitution of the United States that has a sentence that says you got a right to bear arms. Mm-hmm. That's enumerated powers.
Right.
But then implied powers say you need a license. And they say, oh, that's unconstitutional because they don't say it in the Constitution. Because you were never taught by your so-called teachers about enumerated powers, implied powers, resulting powers, and inherent powers. You were never taught this. So this is the result of Jamal Bay. Jamal Bay put facts on the record that what? Lacked legal personality. So he got whooped as a Moorish American. It didn't work. So he went on ahead and got the attorneys, and he tried to enforce what? A legal argument. And in legal argument, they asked one question. You got a license? He said, no. Okay, guess what? Guilty. Just that simple. One question. You got a license? No. Guilty. You don't need no team of lawyers to figure that one out. Guess what his attorneys did? His attorneys who have passed the Bar Association, and they're already attorneys of Massachusetts, and all they had to do was go to the first page of Massachusetts website that says what, dear brother Joseph?
Gun ownership in Massachusetts. Massachusetts residents 15 years and older who wish to possess, carry, and transport firearms, ammunition, and feeding devices are required to have a firearms license. Firearms licenses are issued by municipal police departments.
So what's happening here? What do we take away from this thus far? Who is Massachusetts according to the United States of America, the United States? Massachusetts is what? A state. Mm-hmm. And the state is creating what? Laws. It's creating laws. So why do the Moors need a constitution in Morocco? So we can have enumerated powers and implied powers of the legislators creating laws that help to protect Moors. Listen, it's too easy. What is a constitution? Brother Dre.
Definition of constitution. The organic and fundamental law of a nation or state, which may be written or unwritten, establishing the character and conception of its government, laying the basic principles to which its internal life is to be conformed, organizing the government, and regulating, distributing, and limiting the functions of its different departments, and prescribing the extent and manner of the exercise of sovereign powers. A charter of government deriving its whole authority from the governed.
All right. So the Constitution, right? Keep in mind, this is Black's Law Dictionary, 4th edition. They came out in what year? 1951, right? So the Black's Law Dictionary, 4th edition, is almost 75 years old. And this is the favorite dictionary that Moors like to use, 4th edition. But yet they don't go back and look these words up and fully comprehend what these words are saying to them. So they say and enforce the Constitution, but they don't technically know what a Constitution does. It creates what? Laws, but it also creates what? Implied powers for the legislators to create additional laws outside of the Constitution. So there are addendums, legislation's addendum to the Constitution. Constitution's the master contract. Legislation's addendums to the master contract. This is too easy. Listen. Constitution, the organic and fundamental law of a nation or state. So the Constitution does what? It creates the laws for the nation or state. That's what the Constitution is for. Which may be written or unwritten, establishing the character and conception of its government. So the Constitution creates what? The government. So the Moors keep saying they got a Constitution. Okay, where's the government? It don't exist because you ain't got no Constitution either. Listen, laying the basic principles to which its internal life is to be conformed, organizing the government, and regulating, distributing, and limiting the functions of its different departments. What's departments of the government? Right, so you got the government, the what? Executive branch, but you also have a legislative branch and judicial branch. These are institutions of the Constitution. The Constitution sets up 3 branches of government. Continuing, and prescribing the extent and manner of the exercise of sovereign power. So who's exercising sovereign powers? The state, the Constitution, and the government. That's who's exercising sovereign powers, not no individual person. The state does that, and the state grants powers to the government, and the government extends powers to who? The people. So it's the state, but the state is recognized by what? The Constitution. The Constitution sets up 3 branches of government. The 3 branches of government then governs over the people. And the state is how we end up with our nationality, because we got the same last name as the state, because the state is a person in international law. The state is female in character. So therefore we get the last name of our mother. And whatever the name of your state is, you get that last name, i.e. the nationality, to recognize you as a part of that family. She extends the nationality to you. Listen. So that's the Constitution. Moors in the Constitution to set up the life of the state. Listen, what else the Moors got to understand? Now once you have a Constitution, now you got a legislative branch. Now this is what happens next after you have the Constitution. What's next, Brother Dre?
Legislative, to enact laws or pass resolutions. To make or enact a law or laws.
Pause, read again.
Legislative, to enact laws or pass resolutions. To make or enact a law or laws.
Now they're talking about what? Implied powers. Because now the legislators are legislating. To legislate means to pass bills, to pass laws into laws. Because you got the Constitution, master contract, and now the legislative branch has to create what? Addendums to the master contract, commonly known as what? Legislation. So it says legislate, to enact laws or pass resolutions. So if they're enacting laws, who enacts laws? The legislative branch. But wait, I thought the Constitution already had some laws. This is what the Moors think. Oh, the laws is already the Constitution. No, that's the master contract. The question is which one is your master contract? Still, is your master contract the United States of America's master contract Constitution? Or is your master contract the Empire Morocco Constitution? That's the question. Are you going to stick with your adopted mother's Constitution over here? Or are you going to return back to your mother's Constitution? Your biological mother's state? Or you going to stay with your adopted mother's state?
Right.
And this is the problem. The Moors don't want to abide by the house rules of their adopted mother's state. That's the problem. The Moors don't realize they're adopted, and you got to go by your mother's rules. She's your adopted mother, but it's still her damn house rules. And you know damn well you ain't gonna walk in nobody's mother's house and tell her that you ain't gonna abide by her rules. Because you know what's gonna happen next? You're gonna get a left, right. You're toothless. That's what's gonna happen, and that's what happened to Jamal. He tried to walk into his adopted mother's house and tell her he ain't abiding by her rules. And you know what happened to Jamal? He got a left, right. He's toothless. You see? But the Treaty of Madrid of 1880, Article 15, Paragraph 1 said Jamal's supposed to do what? Return, repatriate back to his own, what? Biological mother state. And then what? Jamal still had to do what? Choose between the entire laws of the Empire of Morocco. He never did that. Even though AMPAC extended his arms to Jamal months ago. He ignored it. You see, I tried to help Jamal more than once, but he didn't listen. Okay, so what's happening? So the legislative branch enacts laws. Therefore, those are what? New laws. That's called implied power. So there was already laws in the Constitution. Isn't that correct? Yes. So now the legislative branch is doing what? Enacting some new laws. That's implied powers. So you got enumerated powers of the Constitution, then implied powers of the legislative branch. Okay, let's read about the legislators. Okay, Brother Dre.
Legislation, the act of giving or enacting laws, the power to make laws, the act of legislating, preparation and enactment of laws, the making of laws by express decree.
All right, read it again.
Legislation, the act of giving or enacting laws, the power to make laws, the act of legislating, preparation and enactment of laws, the making of laws by express decree.
You see? So if they're making laws, that means those are what? New laws. But I thought there was already some laws in the Constitution. Yeah, those are enumerated laws of a Constitution. Now you need additional law. That's why it's called addendums. You're adding language, it's extended language in a legislative act. That's now what? An attachment to the Constitution. You see? Let's read it again. I got it. Legislation. The act of giving or enacting laws. The power to make laws. The act of legislating, preparation and enactment of laws, the making of laws by express decree. Have the Moorish Americans passed any laws? No. You know why they haven't passed any laws? Because they ain't got no state. They got no legislative branch. You see? This is why they keep telling the Moors everything you're saying is what? A belief, because you have no legal personality. It don't exist. It's an abstract. We're going to learn today about what an abstract is versus what? Concrete law. You're going to find out what abstract law is versus concrete law. Just bear with me. Be patient. I'm trying to teach them more something here. Something your Moorish American teacher is not going to teach you. Now listen. So it keeps talking about laws, right? So up here it says legislates about what? Laws, right? About law or laws. Right? He's talking about laws. Down here in the legislation, he's talking about what? Enacting laws. And then the word laws is right there. Then you come over here, he's talking about laws. So legislation is about what? Laws. Because the Constitution has laws. And then it's implied laws that come from the legislative branch. Right? Listen, what are laws, Brother Dre?
Law, that which is laid down, ordained, or established, a rule or method according to which phenomena or actions coexist or follow each other. That which must be obeyed and followed by citizens, subject to sanctions or legal consequences, is a quote-unquote law.
Read it again.
Law, that which is laid down, ordained, or established, a rule or method according to which phenomena or actions coexist or follow each other. That which must be obeyed and followed by citizens subject to sanctions or legal consequences is a quote-unquote law.
So therefore, the Moors have to understand what is a law. Laws create what? Consequences. They say everybody got a right. What are rights? Laws. And the state creates laws. And anybody who breaches the laws, right, are found what? Guilty. So Jamal Bay did what? He breached. Right? He breached the laws, right? He breached, right? It's an injury is a breach of law. So Jamal did what? He injured the laws of the state. So therefore, since he injured the laws of the state, that means he breached the law. So therefore, he created an injury because he did what? He violated, he broke what? The law of Massachusetts. And this is what laws do. Laws protect the people. But anybody who breaches the law has to go to court, and if they found guilty, right, then they're what? Sentenced. And that's what happens over here in the third box, third column, is settled by the judge, and the judge is using what? Laws. It's settled by laws. And everybody's evidence had to be supported by what? Law. And everybody was using law, concrete law, to support their evidence, and then the evidence found a person guilty, and the judge settles it with a ruling, because he's ruling based upon what? Law. Moorish Americans don't have no laws. Let me ask the Moorish Americans a question. Show me where the Moorish America state and its three branches of government and its constitution says anything about Moorish Americans bearing arms. Do Moorish Americans have a constitution regarding bearing arms? No. Do they have a three branches of government, and one of the branches, the legislative branch, that passed legislation that gave Moorish Americans a right to bear arms without permits? No. So what rights are Moorish Americans trying to invoke and exercise if the damn rights don't exist under Moorish America as a state or Moorish America's legislative branch? They have no standing in law because they can't stand on no laws of the Moorish America state or the Moorish America legislative branch. Even the Moorish Americans' constitutions, whether you're talking about the Temple Moors Constitution, right, or C.M. Bay's Constitution, the Zodiac Constitution, it don't say nothing about your rights to bear arms. But the Moorish Americans keep talking about they have a right to bear arms. So what are they invoking? The same Constitution of the United States that they say they're not even a citizen of. They say, I'm not a citizen of the United States. But then as soon as they get caught up, what do they use as defense? United States laws. Why aren't you using your Moorish American laws? Because you ain't got none. Now I know the Moors are sensitive, but I'm just keeping it real. More, set up the panel. I challenge any grand sheiks to produce a constitution that talks about bearing arms for Moorish Americans. It don't exist. I challenge any grand sheik to set up the panel and have a legal argument to show me that they got legislative acts that says Moorish Americans have a right to bear arms without licenses or permits. But wait a minute, what's the name of the state? It's a Mexam? Really? I ain't ever seen no constitution that's recognized in international law called a Mexam. So you're going to say you got a Mexam right? So what's your nationality if the state is called a Mexam? Your nationality, a Mexam? Think about it. You say the name of the state is a Mexam, then your nationality must be a Mexam. Think about it. The people are named after the land, and the land is named after the people. If you say the land is a Mexam, then what's your nationality? See what I'm saying? This stuff don't make no sense. These are just generic questions I'm asking, and people can't answer it. I'm asking a legal question. No one can answer that legal question. They can't answer it. And I love all the Moors. I'm just tired of seeing the Moors get played. I feel sorry for good brother Jamal Bay because he got suckered. He went over to Harvey Bay Publications and got himself a nationality card, and now he got to deal with this dilemma for 10 years. How did I come up with 10 years for Jamal Bay? Well, he got caught up in the year 2021 with this case. Isn't that correct in Massachusetts?
Yes.
Now we're in the year 2024. So if you count from the time he got caught up in 2021 to the year 2024, that's what, about 3 years, right? 2021 to 2022, 2022 to 2023, 2023 to 2024. That's 3 years him been dealing with this. That's off the top, 3 years. Now he's found guilty, and he's sentenced to what? 3 to 5 years, right? Well, let's say he only does 3 years. Okay, you got the first 3 years from 2021 to 2024. Then you add 3 more years because he got to do some time. That's 6 years. Now he got 6 years, and then probation is what? 4 years. You do the math, 6 plus 4 is what? 10. So he got to deal with this for 10 years, all because he didn't have a license. All he had to do was get a license. He could have avoided all of this. But his Moorish American teacher told him he didn't need a license. This is shameful, and I feel sorry for good brother Jamal Bay because he got caught up. But like Noble Drew Ali said, Moors are what? Hard-headed, stiff-necked, and a mean set of people, and the only time they'll do something is at the point of a sword. And Jamal is stubborn. And a lot of Moorish Americans are stubborn. And then they find those silver bracelets on their wrist, and next you know they're behind bars, and I guess you think that's fiction too. Oh man, they jailed de facto. Yeah, you be screaming at while you're sitting in the jail cell, doing 3 to 5. Then when you get out, the probationary officer, he at your house at 6 a.m., waking you up. Might even come at 10 o'clock at night, waking you up, telling you to step out. They want to search your house at 5 o'clock in the morning. Sun ain't even up yet. They looking for what? Arms to see if you violated your parole. Probation officer just, come on down here and take a test today. It's a surprise. They call you at 3:30 in the morning, tell you better be down there by 4:30. Jamal got to deal with that for 4 years of a probationary officer treating him like he's a child. All because his so-called master teacher told him he didn't need a license. And now just this one incident, because you know Jamal Bay has been in all kind of incidents. Just this one incident is going to cost him 10 years of hardship in his life. Not to mention he done left his wife and 2 children out on the street to take care of themselves. His wife and 2 children got to fend for themselves while Jamal's in jail, and he still gonna need some Federal Reserve notes while he's in jail. This is sad. This is what the Moorish Americans got caught up in because they Moorish American teachers is making all this money at the top of the pyramid scheme, and all their students are getting caught up. And they don't know nothing about positive law, facts, and case law. They don't know because they don't understand enumerated powers, implied powers, resulting powers, and inherent powers. They don't understand the power of the state. They think power comes from their dang on temples. They think power comes from their dang on civic organizations. They've been miseducated.
RV Bay Publications too.
Yeah, RV Bay Publications, a e-commerce website, is a third-party interloper. That's all RV Bay Publications is. Let me tell Black America. Black America, stay away from RV Bay Publications unless you want to go to jail. That's what you need to understand. Listen, we're talking law, Brother Dre.
The term is also used in opposition to quote unquote fact. Thus, questions of law are to be decided by the court, while it is the province of the jury to solve questions of fact.
Pause, read it again.
The term is also used in opposition to quote unquote fact. Thus, questions of law are to be decided by the court, while it is the province of the jury to solve questions of fact.
All right, let's break this down. This is very important. More got to understand. Listen. The term, what term? Law. The term law is also used in opposition to fact. See? So over here, you got facts. But is your facts supporting law? Moorish Americans got facts. they ain't got law because they made up some fictitious documents to call themselves Moorish Americans. That's a fact. Moorish Americans got a nationality card. That's a fact. Moorish Americans got all kinds of books and documents and affidavits. That's a fact. But it has no standing against what?
Law.
Law. Your facts don't supersede law. Unless your facts are what? In alignment to what? Law. Substantive law. Standing in law. Laws that you can actually do what? Invoke and exercise. And they keep trying to tell Moors, Eric, all your facts are what? Beliefs. You can't prove it. Therefore, you have no standing in law. I'm reading again. The term, what term? Law. The term law is also used in opposition to fact. So both law and fact, right? Law and fact are not the same. Law has standing. Facts don't automatically have standing unless it's proven that that fact is supportive of the law. And Moors keep introducing fictitious facts. Listen from the top. The term, what term? Law. The term law is also used in opposition to fact. Thus, questions of law are to be decided by the court. Moors are arguing with cops on the side of the road. Cops are not the law. What's the law? The law is found in where? The court. So the state issues laws and they tell everybody to go argue in what? The court. That's where you find a place where you can argue, have a legal argument is where? In the court. Not on the side of the street. The cop is not the court. The cop is not the judge. But Moorish America's been taught to argue with who? The cops. And the cops is not the court. And the cops is not the judge. And the cop is not the prosecutor. But all the Moors argue with cops. Because that's what they were taught. Oh man, see, you gotta show the highwayman, right? Because you gotta give him this paperwork, and then you get to arguing with the cop. And the cop's like, man, I don't practice law. I hand out citations. Once I give you the citation, you can go argue with the court. I'm gonna read it again. Listen. Thus, the question of law ought to be decided by the court. Not the cop. Listen. While it is the province of the jury to solve questions of fact. Let's read it from the top so this will make sense. The term law is also used in opposition to fact. Thus, questions of law are to be decided by the court. While it is the province of the jury to solve questions of fact. You see what they did in that last sentence? Did you catch the word play, the games that's being played? So the jury don't know nothing about what? Law. So they let the jury sit there, listen to what? Facts. But the whole time the prosecutor and the judge knows what? The law. And the jury don't know nothing about law. They just listening to the storyline of facts. And as soon as they go back to the back room to deliberate on the facts, what does the judge hand them? Go read these laws. Go read these laws. Because Jamal Bay, I'm just using Jamal Bay as an example. He sit there and say, well, the only reason why I didn't have a license because I didn't have a job. And I meant to get a license. I just didn't have enough time. And I got caught up before I could get the license. But I had every intent to get the license. And the jury's like, man, we feel sorry for this guy. He was about to go get the license, according to what he said. Oh, and Jamal says, I got a wife and I got 2 children. So please have clemency on me. I learned my lesson. I'll get the license next time. But please, I got a wife and 2 children. And this the jury said, dang, this is terrible. These are facts. This man got a wife and 2 children. It's a fact. He don't have a license, but he said he had intentions of getting a license. So now the jury got to get up, go back in the back room. Before they get back there, the judge says, take this law back there with you and read it. And it says what in the law? What does it say in the law? Brother Joseph?
Gun ownership in Massachusetts. Massachusetts residents 15 years and older who wish to possess, carry, and transport firearms, ammunition, and feeding devices are required to have a firearms license. Firearms licenses are issued by municipal police departments.
So the jury goes back there and they read something like this and say, dang, the law said he got to have a license no matter what his story is. So now Jamal's facts go out the window because the jury has to abide by what? The law. And the judge has to abide by what? The law. And the judge also looks at what? Case law in the rears to see everybody got caught up that didn't have a license, was found guilty, and they got sentenced to X amount of years under what they call sentencing guidelines. Next thing Jamal gets what? 3 to 5 plus 4 years probation. You see what's happening? So this man probably going to deal with all this from the year 2021 all the way what? To year 2031. All because he didn't have a license because he was listening to Tariq Bey. Keeping in mind, Tariq Bey didn't have his back. And neither did Cujo. Everybody turned their back on Jamal. But I didn't turn my back. I extended my arms. He never reached out. Listen, still talking about the definition of law. Okay, Brother Dre, definition of law.
Act of the legislator deposited in office of Secretary of State, properly authenticated by presiding officers of the two houses and approved by governor.
Pause, read again.
Act of the legislator deposited in office of Secretary of State, properly authenticated by presiding officers of the two houses and approved by governor.
Okay. So law is an act of legislator deposited in the office of Secretary of State, properly authenticated by presiding officers of the two houses, the legislative houses, and approved by the governor. These are what? Constitutional procedures, procedural law. The legislators have to pass the bill and then pass the bill over to who? The governor or head of state or head of government to pass it into what? Law. So the legislation is passed by the House. They pass that legislation over to the governor or president. He signs it into what? Law. Have the Moorish Americans done that? No. Why did the Moors need a constitution in Morocco? So we can have a constitution that has a legislative branch, and the legislative branch passes bills over to the head of government or the head of state, and then passes into law. That's why the Moors need a constitution to set up the government with the proper nationality of what? Moroccan. Listen. So law is what, Brother Dre?
Body of principles, standards, and rules promulgated by government.
Pause. Read again.
Body of principles, standards, and rules promulgated by government.
So who creates the laws? The government. Does the Moorish Americans have a government? No. So how the heck do they have rules and laws if they don't even have a government? I'm trying to help the Moors here. I love all the Moors, but I'm pointing out what? All of our problems, and I'm replacing it with what? Solutions that's in a Black's Law dictionary that you've had in your possession for decades. The Moors have had this Black's Law dictionary, 4th edition, in their possession for years. It's been out since 1951. Nearly 75 years this dictionary been out, and the Moors been reading it and telling all the black people, you need to get a Black's Law dictionary, 4th edition. But yet the Moors ain't read it. They damn self, they're telling black people to get a dictionary, and the Moors haven't read the damn dictionary. This is ridiculous. This is too simple. Okay, listen. So laws are what? A body of principles. Laws are a body of standards, and laws create rules promulgated, meaning announced as public law by who? By the government regarding the state. You see, The state's constitution set up three branches of government. Three branches of government. The legislative branch now invokes what? Legislation. The legislation is passed into law by the head of state or the head of government. Moorish Americans never took those steps. So what are you saying when you say you got some rights to bear arms when you can't produce no Moorish American law that said you had a right to bear arms without a license? Listen. So once you have laws, right, now you got what? Positive law. Brother Dre from the top.
Positive law. Law actually and specifically enacted or adopted by proper authority for the government of an organized jural society.
Pause, read it again.
Positive law. Law actually and specifically enacted or adopted by proper authority for the government of an organized jural society.
All right, she's from the top. Positive law. Because now that your legislative branch, well, first your constitution had laws, that's enumerated powers, right? Then the legislative branch had what? Implied powers to create what? New acts called legislation. And that legislation is passed over to who? The head of state or the head of government to pass it into what? Law. Right? So the Constitution set up a legislative branch. Through the legislative branch, it creates legislation, and legislation is passed over the head of state or the head of government and signed into law. You see that? These are steps, constitutional procedures. Listen. So positive law is law actually and specifically enacted or adopted by proper authority for the government of an organized jural society. The government enacts laws, not your dang on temples. The government of the state enacts laws, not your dang on civic organizations. This is Black's Law Dictionary. Moors had it in possession for years. As soon as I came in the movement in 2018, by the year 2020, I kept hearing Moors say, you need to get Black's Law Dictionary. So I ran out, spent 275 notes on a Black's Law Dictionary, and come to find out the Moors didn't even read it their damn selves. But guess who's reading it now? The Moroccans are reading the Black's Law Dictionary, because read means to what? To comprehend, to use forensics, not just skim over words, pronouncing words out loud like a 3-year-old. No, you got to read it like an adult. Adults supposed to know how to read. Adults know that you have to pronounce words and understand each word, because words create sentences, sentences create paragraphs, and paragraphs create contracts. And if you don't understand the words, how the hell you going to understand the contract? I'm going to read it again. Positive law. Law actually and specifically enacted or adopted by proper authority. Who's the proper authority? The authority of what? The state. Not of a temple and not of an organization. Now remember, the op-ed from the news agency called Jamal what? An independent organization. But was saying the police work for who? The state. You see? So that news article was talking about, well, the proper authority locked up Jamal, and the proper authority found Jamal guilty. This stuff's too easy when you read this stuff. What's the use of having a Black's Law Dictionary? Keeping in mind, Black's Law Dictionary isn't law, it's just definitions of words. Listen, positive law. A law, in the sense in which that term is employed in jurisprudence, is enforced by a sovereign political authority. What's the sovereign authority? The state. The Moors keep running around here trying to enforce some laws, but they're stateless. Therefore, you have no sovereign authority. But yet Moors keep trying to enforce the word. They think the word Moor in itself has sovereign authority. It does not. The word Moor can only be activated once you do what? Pledge your allegiance back to the Empire Morocco state. And the Empire Morocco's government then issues you what? state ID. Then the word more becomes active, i.e. becomes what? Determinate. What does determinate means? The state determines whether you are more or not. Therefore, if the state don't recognize you, that immediately becomes what? Indeterminate. So you got determinate versus indeterminate. What's indeterminate mean? You have no indeterminate, there's no indeterminate evidence. Where's your evidence? But determinate means you have what? Evidence, i.e. you have what? A legal argument. Your legal argument is based on the properly written instruments that came from the state. Do you have state ID? Do you have state issued license for that weapon? Do you have state issued license for that arm? And what state gave you that license? Was it the United States of America's internal state called Massachusetts? Or was it the Empire Morocco state that issued your license for that arm? Oh, you ain't got no license at all? Okay, guess what? You violated Massachusetts laws because you still traveling Massachusetts jurisdiction because you still a naturalized Moor subject, i.e. you still a citizen of the United States. Listen. So positive laws, a law in the sense in which that term is employed in the jurisprudence is enforced by a sovereign political authority. It is thus distinguished not only from all rules which, like the principles of morality and the so-called laws of honor and of fashion are what? Are enforced by indeterminate authority, but also from all rules enforced by determinate authority. So they just pointed out right here, indeterminate versus what? Determinate authority. So Moorish Americans are running around with what? Indeterminate Moorish American identification cards. It's indeterminate. Why? Because they can't prove that it came from a state. And then the prosecutor turns around and he has determinate identification. He proves that you're actually who? The Moorish subject, commonly known as who? Jamal Bay. Jamal Latimer. In this example, the prosecutor can prove who you are. And you can't prove who you say you are. You say you Jamal Bay. And the prosecutor said, no, he's Jamal Latimer. Because the prosecutor has what? Determinate evidence to prove who we are. The Moorish Americans run around with what? Indeterminate evidence because they got their stuff from RB Bay Publications. A third-party interloper, right? An e-commerce website that's only made to create money. Listen to me, brother Dre from top.
A law, in the sense in which that term is employed in jurisprudence, is enforced by a sovereign political authority. It is thus distinguished not only from all rules which, like the principles of morality and the so-called laws of honor and of fashion, are enforced by an indeterminate authority, but also from all rules enforced by a determinate authority, which is either, on the one hand, superhuman, or, on the other hand, politically subordinate, in order to emphasize the fact that quote-unquote laws, in the strict sense of the term, are thus authoritatively imposed. They are described as positive laws.
So the positive law is created by who? The proper authority. And the proper authority enacts positive law that's determinate law. What does determinate means? It becomes what? Concrete, because it's real laws that came from the Constitution or the legislative branch. Indeterminate laws is what the Moorish Americans keep putting on the record, thinking it has standing, and it has no standing in law because there's no Moorish America state that issued any laws regarding arms as an example. You got to see what's happening here under positive law. So if the Moors don't have positive law, that means they're trying to enforce what? Negative law. It's negative and not positive. So negative means what? No. Right? No what? No what? Legal argument, no standing in law, you have no legal personality. That's what negative law is. This is what Moors keep putting on the record. because they don't understand law. They think they understand law and they don't. Then they got the audacity to put on black fezzes like they understand law. And people with black fezzes are going to jail. They're going to jail. Because they say, I don't want to wear no auburn colored fez. I don't want to wear a red fez. I think I've been studying long enough to put on a black fez. And next you know they got on silver handcuffs. Because they think they know law and they don't. No. And I challenge anyone running around wearing a black fez, set up the panel, bring your legal arguments to the table. Wear your black fez. I'll wear mine. And let's see who end up taking theirs off at the end of the day once I destroy all your so-called legal arguments. I will crush any more. And I love all the Moors, but we got to put an end to this foolishness and all this propaganda that's being taught to Moors because Jamal Bay is doing 3 to 5. Why is he doing 3 to 5? Because he was taught to someone who wears a black fez. A black fez taught Jamal Bay everything he knows, and now Jamal Bay is in jail because somebody wearing a black fez miseducated him. So I tell all these Moors wearing these black fezzes, bring it to the panel, set it up, so I can crush all your so-called legal arguments so we can prevent people like good brother Jamal Bay from going to jail and leaving his wife and two children out on the street to fend for themselves, all because Jamal Bay and his wife was miseducated by people wearing black fezzes. That must be understood. Propaganda is what's being taught. Listen. Now let's talk about municipal law. This is what the United States is using. Okay, Brother Dre.
Municipal law. Not the law of a city only, but the law of the state.
Read it again.
Municipal law. Not the law of a city only, but the law of the state.
So municipal law, according to the United States and the several union states, they say municipal law is not the law of a city only, but the law of the state. You see how they keep invoking this word state? This is why laws are derived from. What should the Moors take away from this so far? If you ain't got no state, then you ain't got no what? Laws. Noble Ali said, learn from the Europeans so you can run governments. What do the Europeans have? States and laws. What part don't you understand about that? Continue, Brother Drake.
In contradistinction to international law, it is the law of an individual state or nation.
Paul, so municipal law, read it again.
In contradistinction to international law, it is the law of an individual state or nation.
So the United States and the several union states, municipal laws are a contradistinction to international law. So what they're saying to you is that the municipal laws of the United States and the several union states contradict international law. Therefore, the municipal laws of the several union states in the United States are in a contentious dispute with international law. So therefore, the United States and the several union states are operating in what? Negative law, that they're trying to say it's positive law. And they, in their own Black's Law Dictionary, 4th edition, came out in 1951, that they say in their own municipal laws, commonly known as their domestic internal laws, right, are what? A contradistinction to international law. Now let me ask you a question. Don't the Moorish Americans keep running around talking about, we got to enforce international law? Then they turn right back around and try to enforce some stare decisis, some type of laws of the several union states. They try to enforce some type of federal statute while simultaneously talking about they enforcing international law. Well, heck, if the Black's Law Dictionary that all the Moorish Americans told me to go purchase turned around and said municipal laws are contradistinction to international law, then why do the Moors keep talking about international law if in fact they know municipal laws contradict international law? But the Moors keep trying to enforce what? Domestic municipal laws. When they should be trying to enforce what? International law. But they're all trying to study and memorize what? Municipal laws. They're trying to memorize UCCs, all kind of statutes. But yet they told me to purchase the Black's Law Dictionary, and in the Black's Law Dictionary it says municipal law is a contradistinction to international law. Then why are the Moors studying municipal laws? This don't make no sense. Listen, now let's talk rights. All right? And I thank the Moors for your patience. We're going to close out here very shortly. Now that you got a constitution, and now the legislative branch has set up some what? Legislation, and it's signed into law by the head of state or the head of government. Now that creates what? Rights. What are rights? Laws. What are rights? Laws. Everybody keeps saying, they're breaching my rights. They're violating my rights. Okay, tell me the law that supports your rights. See, they throw around this word rights like it's just some miscellaneous word. But yet they think the word saying right gives them some rights, but they don't understand your rights under a fact, because you're saying your rights, because you're quoting a fact. Okay, does that right support a law? Can you go and invoke the law? And the next question is what law did you invoke? Was it municipal law? While saying you were Moor? Because Moor is an international word. And you're invoking some municipal law which contradicts international law. So when you invoke municipal law, it contradicts Moorish law. This is too easy. Listen, a right. Moors keep talking about rights. Okay, rights are binding to laws. Okay, Nova?
Right. As a noun and taken in an abstract sense, justice, ethical correctness, or consonance with the rules of law or the principles of morals. In this signification, it answers to one meaning of the Latin jus, and serves to indicate law in the abstract, considered as the foundation of all rights, or the complex of underlying moral principles which impart the character of justice to all positive law, or given it an ethical content.
Okay. So right. Now watch. They're going to break it down in two subsections. The first subsection on the definition of rights is going to talk about abstract. Abstract. Okay, see this word right here, abstract. And then the second subsection, the next paragraph, it's going to talk about concrete. So first we're going to learn about abstract, and then second we're going to learn about concrete in the second paragraph. Okay? Listen. Right. What's a right? A right is about what? Laws. Listen. Right. As a noun, and taken in an abstract sense, justice, ethical, right, correctness or consonance with the rules of law or the principles of morals. In this signification, it answers to one meaning of the Latin jus, and serves to indicate law in the abstract, considered as the foundation of all rights, or the complex of underlying moral principles which impart the character of justice to all positive law, or give it an ethical content. So what happens? All laws start in what? The abstract. Someone has to write the laws. So all laws start in the lawmaker's heads. So your legislative branch writes the laws. So first it starts off as an abstract. You say, hey, man, we need a law regarding what? Arms. So, okay, that's an abstract. Okay, well, who's going to write it? Well, let the legislative branch write it. So it goes from an abstract, and then it's put into what? The properly legal instrument commonly known as what? A bill. But first it starts off in abstract in your head, then it does what? You take your think and put it to what? Ink. You take your think abstract and put it to ink. And that goes from an abstract now to the paper. From think to ink. Okay? Some laws are not necessarily written. What's an abstract law that most people are familiar with? I'll give you an example. It's called look both ways before you cross the street. That's an abstract law that everybody knows. That's what? A rule of thumb. Isn't that the same rule of thumb? Yes. To look both ways. But there's no statute that says every citizen must look both ways before they cross the street. There's no statute that says that. But it's recognized as an abstract that says people should look both ways. But it's not written in law. But it's a good exercise of a principle that people should use. You listening? Okay, listen. So from the top, rights of laws as a noun and taken in an abstract sense, justice, ethical, correctness, or consonance with the rules of law or the principles of morals. You see, so it's written laws and then there's just simply morals, right? What's a moral law? Well, you shouldn't go around smacking people on their behind in the public. But that's not necessarily a law that says you can't smack a person on the behind. So they create other laws that say, well, that's considered what? Potentially what? Assault. But the reality is, did they really assault them because they smacked them behind? Well, I don't know. The law says if you touch somebody outside of their will, that's assault. But there's no law that says you don't have a right to go smack people in the butt behind while you're going down the street. So from a moral perspective, you shouldn't smack people in the behind if you don't know. Listen. It says, in this significance, it answers to one meaning of the Latin just and serves to indicate law in the abstract considered as the foundation of all rights. So the foundation starts where? In your head. But it can't stay there. It has to go where next? From your think to what? To ink. And who's the only person can write laws? Legislators. And the Moors, Americans are making up so-called laws that was never written by a legislator. You got to catch what I'm saying. So everything the Moorish Americans is invoking is what? Abstract. Listen, next paragraph. Brother Dre.
As a noun, and taken in a concrete sense, a power, privilege, faculty, or demand inherent in one person and incident upon another. Quote-unquote rights are defined generally as powers of free action. And the primal rights pertaining to men are undoubtedly enjoyed by human beings purely as such, being grounded in personality and existing antecedently to their recognition by positive law, but leaving the abstract moral sphere and giving to the term a juristic content, a quote-unquote right, is well defined as, quote unquote, a capacity residing in one man of controlling with the assent and assistance of the state, the actions of others.
Listen. So you go from abstract, right? Now you go into what? The concrete sense. You see down here? The concrete law. See, when you go into court, they ain't talking abstract no more. They talking about concrete law. What's in writing? You see? Moorish Americans ain't got nothing in writing that supports the fact that they're Moorish Americans. So you keep putting on the record something that has no legal standing in law. This is why I keep trying to tell you, you're operating in the abstract, i.e. a belief. You got to operate under what? Concrete laws. Listen. As a noun. And taken in concrete sense. What's the noun? What are we looking up right now? What? Let's remind ourselves. What's the word? We're talking what? Rights. So rights are derived from what? The laws. The laws came from what? The state's proper authority, which is the Constitution and the legislators, the three branches of government. So now we read about abstract laws. Now let's talk about concrete laws as what? In writing. Rights as a noun and taken into a concrete sense, meaning improperly written instruments passed by the legislators, a power, privilege, faculty, or demand inherent, See that? Inherent in one person. Who's the one person? It's the state. The state is a person in international law. So all the power is in the hands of who? The state. Now do you understand when the writer of that op-ed in the news, she said what? The state police and the state authority locked up Jamal. And what was Jamal using as his legal argument? Something about some independent organization. He was done off the top. Because the state is the power. Listen. As a noun and taken into concrete sense, a power, privilege, faculty, or demand inherent in one person and incident upon another. So therefore the state can bring what? It can bring what? A suit against another. Who's the other? Persons. Who are persons? States. Who else are persons? Human beings. Who else are persons? Corporations. So you have to make the distinction is what? So a person is who? A person could be what? An artificial person or a juridical person, or a state can be what? A human person. So when they use the word person, they use it in a general sense, but now you have to turn around and define exactly what they're saying. So they'll switch up on you now. First they're talking about the state. Now they're talking about the state can bring suit against who? Human beings. Watch what they say. These concrete laws can do next. Watch. I'm going to take it from the top. I'm talking about the state. They're going to say the state's bringing laws against other states. And then the state's bringing suits against who? Human beings called men. Listen. As a noun and taken into a concrete sense, a power, privilege, faculty, or demand inherent on one person, which is a state, and incident upon another, what? State. Then listen. Rights are defined generally as powers of free action and the primal rights pertaining to men. So the men create these rights. Don't get caught up in the word men as a gender. It's just legislators are creating rights. But these laws can be binding against states, and these laws can be binding against what? Human beings. Listen. And the primary rights pertaining to men are undoubtedly enjoyed by human beings, purely as such, being grounded in personality. What's the personality? The state. The what? Legal personality. You see these words they're using? More has been skipping over these words. They never understood what the personality meant when they saw personality. The personality is of the state, and the state itself is an abstract that's turned into full manifest by the Constitution and the human being that sits in the office of government. The state comes to life. It goes from an abstract that's put into a properly written instrument of Constitution. The Constitution creates seats of government, and human beings sit in those seats. And now that Constitution and state becomes full manifest. It becomes fully manifested by the human being. You see? This is what Moore's got to understand. Moore's told me to get a Black's Law Dictionary, but I'm learning the Moors didn't read the Black's Law Dictionary. Now we're using what? Forensics, comprehension. We're breaking down the words. We're reading between the lines. That's what forensics mean. That's what it means to read. Let's read it again. So therefore, the powers of a free action and the primal rights pertaining to men are undoubtedly enjoyed by the human beings, purely as such, being grounded in personality, the personality of the state, because the human being sitting in the chair of government, and existing antecedently to the recognition by positive law. So all the human beings recognize the positive law, because the positive law is concrete law that's put in writing of legislation. But, listen, Moors, pay attention. So it says, but leaving the abstract moral sphere, why did I put that in blue? It says, but leaving the abstract moral sphere, so it's saying you got to leave the abstract and get into what? Concrete law. Leave the abstract and get into what? Concrete law. I'm going to read it again. But leaving the abstract moral sphere, you got to leave it. You got to enter into what? Concrete law. So the abstract starts in your head, and your head says, let's write a law. So the legislators write a law on the implied powers, and now that becomes what? Concrete law. But you got to leave the abstract. You can't stay buffering in the abstract. That's not how you have binding laws. Binding laws need to be in a properly written instrument and not just stuck in your head, and all of a sudden it becomes your belief because you can't prove it because it has no standing in law because you never did what? You never put your think to ink. Listen, but leaving the abstract moral sphere, you got to leave it, and giving to the term of juristic content. Listen, they're going to start breaking it down as I start to close out. But leaving the abstract moral sphere, the Moors got to leave. The Moorish American got to get the hell out of the abstract. You got to get into the concrete. Listen to me. But leaving the abstract moral sphere and giving the term of juristic content. A right is well defined as a capacity residing in one man of controlling with the assent and assistance of the state the actions of others. I'll read it again. By leaving the abstract moral sphere and giving to the term juristic content, a right is well defined as a capacity residing in one man. What's the one man? The state. Mm-hmm. And then the men and women who sit in what? The seat of government, especially the legislative branch. Listen from the top. But leaving the abstract moral sphere and giving to the term a juristic content, a right is well defined as a capacity residing in one state of controlling with the assent and assistance of the state the actions of others. So what's the actions of others? The state controls the actions of others. So therefore, as I start to close out, Massachusetts, right, is a state recognized by who? The United States. The United States is recognized by who? The United States of America. So the United States of America created the United States. The United States turned around and recognized Massachusetts as a state, and Massachusetts laws are concrete, and they use those concrete laws against Jamal Bay. And Jamal Bay tried to put on there as a legal argument some negative law that's based in the belief because he couldn't produce that he was even a Moorish American. Matter of fact, he couldn't even prove that he was Jamal Bay, much less any other Moorish American law that he was trying to put on the record. It got struck from the record, got thrown out. He couldn't introduce it. So then he turned around and had to accept the fact that he was just a U.S. citizen, and he brought in some attorneys, and the attorneys already knew he was guilty because he didn't have what? A license. Because Moors are stuck in the abstract, and now they have to do what? Get out the abstract and come into what? The concrete law. And what creates concrete laws is a start to close out. It's a start to close out. It starts with the Empire of Morocco Constitution. This is why the Moors needed it, so we can create what? Concrete laws. And this is what the Moors got to understand. We'll pick this back up in class 150. All right? One thing I want to say to good brother Jamal Bay is, look, good brother, keep your head up. You need to reach out to the Empire of Morocco. Send a letter to the Sultan. That way we can start working on getting you and all the Moorish Americans in appropriate persona sui juris status. Good brother Jamal, and I say to your wife, you've been lied to, you've been deceived. And because of that, you've been punished. So please, now that you see being a Moorish American has no legal standing, and now that you see being a naturalized Moorish subject also means you must abide by your adopted mother's laws. Please, good brother, and I say to your wife, please reach out to the Empire of Morocco. That way, by the time you get out of there, you can return to Morocco and pledge your allegiance to the entire submission to the laws of the empire. I ain't with that. Islam.
Islam.